Question 18. The author of the passage apparently believes that the most frustrating aspect of Alzheimer's disease for patients and their families is E is the correct answer, not knowing for sure that the patient has been properly diagnosed. That is the most frustrating aspect of this disease for patients and their families. This one is fairly direct and simple. So let me show you exactly where in the reading this can be found before I also quickly eliminate the other choices. This is found here in paragraph 5, as I noted here. It's frustrating for patients, and specifically in the passage. Let's go specifically to the passage right here. Well, first of all, before I go to the specifics, after you've read this paragraph, you should know the key point of this paragraph, and that's the key point of this paragraph is that diagnosis of Alzheimer's in a living patient is not certain, because the only way right now to diagnose Alzheimer's in a living patient is by ruling out other diseases, and this is why it's frustrating, because it's not certain. So that's pretty much what this paragraph is about. And specifically, this is where it states that it's frustrating to patient and family alike, because there's no definite diagnosis. It's only diagnosis available right now for living patients is diagnosis by exclusion, or by eliminating other diseases that resembles Alzheimer's. And so it's just not certain. And so when all the other possible diseases have been dismissed, Alzheimer's would be the most likely disease because of process of elimination, but it cannot be 100% certain, because there's no test, as we've read in other parts of this reading, that there's no test that can specifically diagnose Alzheimer's in a living person. And so this is why it's frustrating, and this matches with the answer E, not knowing for sure that the patient has been properly diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So that's the answer clearly. But although you're quite certain that this is the answer, it's best to also make sure the other choices are not better answers. So choice F tells us that the most frustrating part of this disease is that Alzheimer's symptoms differ according to the individual. This nowhere in the reading tells us this. You could go through the reading. There's nowhere in the reading that tells us about differing symptoms between two Alzheimer's patients, or between many Alzheimer's patients. There's nowhere in the reading, so we could easily eliminate F. Now, choice H tells us that the most frustrating part of this disease is that no one could predict how long before a patient is totally disabled by this disease. This one is nowhere in the reading. You have to be careful. If you have outside knowledge of Alzheimer's disease, if you've read about Alzheimer's disease outside of this reading, you know that this statement is true about Alzheimer's, but this is a reading test. Is this in the reading? No, it's not in this particular reading. If you go through the whole reading, you will not find that in the reading, and therefore we can eliminate H, because nowhere in the reading does the author tell us how long before a patient is totally disabled by the disease. Now, choice J, the most frustrating part of this disease is that only a few patients recover from Alzheimer's. this is also nowhere in the reading, and it's actually not true. Even if you have outside knowledge of this disease, this statement is just not true. And more importantly, it's not in the reading. And so the only choice left and the best choice is E. And as we know in the beginning, we found it directly in the reading.